All right, now let's start to talk about this integumentary system thing, which again, is just a fancy word for your skin. Yeah. Your skin is really important. It does a lot. For one thing, it just protects the inside of your body from physical damage, from the sun's rays, from getting bumped and scratched. Your skin gets scratched, but your muscles don't, which is kind of cool unless you scratch yourself really bad. It provides cushioning and insulation, protect you from the elements. It makes vitamin D, which you need for bone development. Make sure you get some sunshine. Yeah, especially, if there's a nice sunny day and it's been really cloudy, make sure you get out and, have a little sunshine for a bit. It's really good for you. And the skin is actually a really complex structure. It actually makes the skin itself. Also, the hair, the nails, your sweat glands are inside your skin, and oil glands are inside the skin as well. There's also a bunch of sensory receptors, so you can tell whether something's touching you, whether it's hot, whether it's cold, whether it's stretching. There's all kinds of stuff in your skin. It's really pretty cool. All right, so let's look at it. All right, so the integumentary system is broken into two parts. The epidermis is this top part, and then the dermis is this part, this larger part here. Okay, epi means on. So the epidermis literally means on the dermis. Yeah, I know. So this is the part that faces the outside world. Okay, so you can see the hairs coming up here. This is the outside world. So the epidermis sits on the dermis, and then under the dermis is what we call the subcutaneous layer, or the hypodermis, which means below the dermis. Okay. Now, this is not actually the subcutaneous layer. It's not actually part of the integumentary system, but it's also not part of any other system. So we're just going to let it play with the integumentary system for today. Okay. The epidermis and the dermis are also called the cutaneous layer, which is why this is the subcutaneous layer. Ta-da! Okay. You can see, look at all this stuff in here. There's tons of stuff going on in here. It's really complicated. We're going to break it all down. Don't be scared. Okay. It's not that bad. All right, we're going to start off with the epidermis. And we're not actually going to learn the names of all the layers of the epidermis. Just know that they all have different names. Okay, so this here is an enlargement of just this here. Okay, I should get that because it's got a little duct going through there. All right, so we're just looking at the epidermis here. Notice it doesn't have a flat bottom. It's got these little ridges. Those are called epidermal ridges. I know, it's very clever. All right, so the epidermis, its main job is to protect the layers underneath. It's mostly waterproof. It's not completely waterproof, but it is mostly waterproof, which is cool because that means you can go swimming without your whole body just soaking up all the water in the pool and you becoming a sponge. That would honestly be weird. The cells are produced by a layer called the stratum basale, or the basal layer. And those are the only cells that do mitosis, create new cells. And then as they produce new cells, the cells that were just produced gets pushed up. And the cells just keep getting pushed up until they get to the top layer. As they do that, they make a protein called keratin, which is really hard and really tough. And then they die, and you're left with these cell-shaped pieces of keratin. So what you think of as dead skin cells are actually really mostly just keratin. There's not actually much cellular stuff left there. It's mostly just a layer of keratin. And then there's some oils that your cells make kind of to, hold the keratin pieces together, but also to help waterproof and keep water outside of the body. I know, right? Okay, so here's this basal layer. Okay, here's the basement membrane. Okay, so this whole thing is an epithelium, even though there's a couple different shapes of cells going on here. This bottom layer called the stratum basale is actually a single layer of cuboidal cells. This layer, the stratum, wow, I just lost the name, spinosum, because they look spiny. This is stratified cuboidal, and then the rest are all stratified squamous. They're the same cells, they just got smushed. Okay, they started out cuboidal, they got smushed as they went up. Okay, so these cells down here, most of these, are creating new cells. And you can see some small cells being made here, getting pushed up. And so they get pushed up, and as they do that, they're making keratin, and we call them keratinocytes. So these are the keratinocyte stem cells, meaning they're going to make the cells that will become keratinocytes. Keratin is the protein, cytes are the cells, keratinocytes make keratin. I know. What do they do with the keratin? They hang on to it. They just hog it. They just fill themselves up with it. Yeah, that's their only job. Make keratin, fill themselves up with it. Now, down in this basement layer, there's a couple other types of cells. One is really important. These are called melanocytes. What do you think they do? They make melanin. Yeah, that's what they do. They make melanin. Melanocytes produce melanin. They store some of it, but mostly they put it in little packets that they then deliver to other cells. Now you can see that these melanocytes actually have these branches that go out toward other cells. And that just makes it easier for the melanocytes to give melanin to these keratinocytes here in this higher layer of the epidermis. So they make these little pigment granules, little pieces of melanin, and the little granules, little pockets of melanin are called melanosomes, and they pass those off to the keratinocytes. The keratinocytes use the melanin, put the melanin around the nucleus of their own cells, and that melanin prevents UV rays from getting to the DNA inside the nucleus, because UV rays damage DNA. Now, the rest of the cells in your body, like, they're not going to touch melanin. I mean, they're not going to touch UV rays. Like, only your skin is touching the UV rays. So your skin's the only place that has melanin. Okay? The melanin taken up by these other cells in these little melanocytes, it puts the melanocytes, here we go, this is a better one, puts the melanin around the nucleus and literally provides a layer of sunscreen around the DNA. So if you have heard there's no such thing as a safe tan, it's because when your sun is exposed to lots of UV rays, these melanocytes produce more melanin in response. And that's because they are sensing, ooh, there's UV rays, that's going to damage our skin cells. We need to protect it. So darkening of the skin, like a tan, is a sign that your skin cells have realized that there is UV that needs to be protected against. Okay, it's your skin defending itself. Okay. Now, skin color is actually very, very complicated. It's produced by not just melanin. There are a couple different kinds of melanin. There's also some other groups of pigments, including keratin, which you get from yellow-orange vegetables. Some people naturally produce more keratin than others in their skin. And it's kind of has a yellower, oranger tint. And so if you've ever tried to, say, put on a bright pink lipstick and it made your skin look really orange, it's probably because your skin naturally makes more keratin and your skin actually has a slightly orange tint to it. If your skin doesn't make either melanin or keratin, then you're going to have a more pink tint because of the blood vessels running under your skin. And what you're actually seeing is the hemoglobin in the blood vessels. How cool is that? So your skin color is actually really complicated. It is not controlled by one gene. It's actually controlled by a number of genes. And how much melanin your skin makes depends not on the number of melanocytes you have. As far as we can tell, everybody pretty much has the same number of melanocytes, which to me is really weird. But some people's melanocytes make more melanin. So if you have darker skin, it is because your melanocytes make more melanin. Now, notice that I haven't said anything about the color of skin being associated with anything else in human biology. And that's because the color of skin is associated with nothing else in human biology. Literally nothing. Nope, not that. Nope, not that either. Literally nothing. The color of your skin depends on how close to the surface your blood vessels are and how much different pigments your DNA makes you make. And that is it. If you think that the color of someone's skin has some meaningful difference on the kind of person they are, biology does not support that conclusion. You are wrong. There is a lot of medical research that has shown that, for example, African Americans have higher rates of heart disease and diabetes. That got blamed on the color of their skin. But it's not because of the color of their skin. It's because Black people in the United States have more stress than white people. Yeah, that's it. That leads to high diabetes and high blood pressure. Yeah, and heart disease. Yeah. Don't go thinking it has anything to do with anything else. It's just pigment. There you go. All right. Other pigments in the skin. Nevus. A nevus is a mole or a birthmark. It's harmless. It's a little overgrowth of melanocytes. And as long as the mole or the birthmark stays the same way, doesn't change, don't worry about it. If it does start changing, especially if it gets bigger and it changes color, then you need to worry about it. Freckles. Localized melanocyte activity. If you're like me and you get freckles in response to being in the sun, it's because your skin says, oh my gosh, we need to produce some melanin, but your melanocytes are not evenly distributed, so you end up with spots, which frankly, I'm really annoyed about. I wish I could be one of those people who got an even tan because I do like going out in the sun, but I get freckles instead. Now, a hemangioma is a red birthmark, and it's actually a tumor of blood vessels. It's an overgrowth of blood vessels just under the skin. They can be raised, sometimes they're not. They can be red, they can be purple, depending on the way the tumor formed. All right, now let's talk about melanoma. Melanoma is the most serious form of skin cancer. It's not the only kind of skin cancer. Any of the cells in your skin could start reproducing themselves uncontrolled and become cancerous. If melanocytes start reproducing themselves, that can be very serious. It is related to UV damage. We do know that excess to UV exposure can cause skin cancer. And the symptoms are moles that are larger than a quarter of an inch apart. We usually say larger than a pencil eraser, have an irregular border, are asymmetrical, change color, and change size. And changing is a really important thing. If you have a big, weird-shaped mole and it's just like always been there, just keep an eye on it and make sure it doesn't change. Okay? If it does change, then that is something to go get checked out by a doctor. Now, just because you have a mole that changes doesn't mean you have skin cancer. In fact, I had a spot on my leg a few years ago that was like big, irregular, asymmetrical, kind of brownish reddish. I freaked out. I went to the dermatologist, and the dermatologist told me it was an age spot. Yeah. Apparently I'm old enough to have age spots. I wasn't really happy about that. All right, so that's the first part of our skin chapter. I'm going to break there, and when we come back, we're going to start talking about the top layer of the skin.